Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're getting to my highest upside wide receivers in fantasy football. A lot of you guys might be asking yourselves, how do I find upside in fantasy football? And to me, it comes down to one thing, and that is looking for players in new situations. You need to be willing to target the unknown, take the risk, and you'll find upside. And there are two ways to look for players in new situations. That is a new team, a player that goes from one team to another in the next season, or a new offensive play caller. We see an offensive coordinator change. We see a head coaching change. You're going to see a change in philosophy, a change in scheme. This is how you win fantasy leagues. And this is how people won fantasy leagues last season. You look at Josh Jacobs with the Raiders. McDaniels comes in as the new head coach. The running back position becomes a lot more valuable for people. They running the football a little bit more. They targeted their backs a little bit more. And for the receiver position, which we're talking about today, Christian Kirk, a prime example of a player that changes teams. The slot was a really important role for Trevor Lawrence, and once Christian Kirk arrived, it was even more valuable for you in fantasy leagues. Christian Kirk is a guy I loved last season and is a reason why I won some of my fantasy leagues, is because of having Christian Kirk. So while other guys in your league look at players where they feel like they have more certainty, or they saw what they did last season and they think they're just going to do it again, guys like, let's say, a Mike Evans, who's gone for 1,000 receiving yards for 8 straight seasons now, the assumption is going to be he's going to be able to do it again. Or a T. Higgins, who I think everyone should know can't really be a top 5 receiver unless the Jamar Chase injury comes. They're drafting him because they're like, well, I know T. Higgins will be pretty good. Or a Juju Smith-Schuster. Sure, he changes teams, but Juju's in year 7 now? We know what he is. These are players you're like, I'll be able to play them. But instead of drafting those players, you're going to take some risk and you're going to look for players that can provide plenty of upside. Those are the types of guys we're going to talk about today. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, please do let me know. I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be posting content each and every day here, so get those post notifications on. Let's get to our first wide receiver. All right, our first guy up is Mike Williams of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's currently going as the wide receiver 28 in the latter parts of the 6th round. Last year was a very much down season for Williams. He was the wide receiver 31 and the wide receiver 24 in fantasy points per game. Here's the thing to be excited about. Here's the reason why I think he's one of the highest upside players, and one that I have far, far ahead of where his ADP is as wide receiver 28. He is my wide receiver 15, I believe. The Chargers hire Kellen Moore to take over as OC, and the blueprint here of what this team wants to do has been obvious in training camp and should be obvious to you when you look at the Chargers' struggles last season. Justin Herbert, one of the best arms in the entire NFL, had the 4th lowest ADOT last season, just 7 yards, 36th of 41 qualified QB, so the 5th lowest, actually. The constant talk of the offseason is looking to make more plays downfield, put the ball in contested situations, and trust that fantastic arm that Herbert has. The complaint for Joe Lombardi in the last 2 seasons was being too complacent on first down. They ranked 20th in explosive play rate on early downs. This team wants to push the ball downfield more. I've talked about it in previous videos. I've talked about it in our TikTok. I've talked about it in our shorts. I'm a Chargers fan, so I'm locked into training camp as much as anyone can be. And for Williams, the real benefit here is this suits his game exactly what you want, like exactly how he likes to play it. Williams was one of, if not the best downfield receivers in the NFL before the offensive coordinator change. He was top 5 both in yards per reception and an average depth of target. So not only does this offense fit him perfectly with these scheme changes, the team has been talking about wanting to get him into more advantageous situations and advantageous matchups. So I'm pulling up some articles here, or from clippings from an article from The Athletic. Daniel Popper, one of the best writers for the Chargers, if you guys want to get any updates from them. But a quick piece here. So through practices, some of those ideas, like I mentioned, when it comes to getting Williams the ball more often, have really started to emerge. And perhaps the most noteworthy one so far, receiver Mike Williams is moving around a lot more, including playing in the slot and other inside alignments. Next one here, just further down in the article, which I really like to see, is we just know that's going to be more challenging for people to defend. Staley said if aligning Williams inside, when you're putting him in their slot versus a smaller guy, depending on what the coverage is, it's not just Keenan who's always there. We can exploit mismatches the other way. Keenan's kind of a mismatch for a lot of people in the slot. We know Keenan's a fantastic route runner, but you get Mike, you're going to get him to those deeper parts of the field, and that element of body position and his size is going to be able to help you make a lot of big plays. So I love what this team is talking about when making Williams that important piece of their offense, and I can't blame them for it. They paid him 2 years ago. He had that big year. Last year was the down one, or I guess it's not 2 years ago, but a year ago they paid him after a big season the year prior. He can get back to that. He's been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, so I love what they're telling us about him and kind of stacking him in the slot here, trying to get him into advantageous spots. And of course, he's still going to run the vast majority of his routes outside. So you look at the rookie in Quentin Johnston, he's lacked consistency in training camp. I'm still not really sure what his role will be. We'll probably have a better idea closer to the season. And then Allen is always that slot technician. He isn't really a guy known for spreading defenses out. So this is Williams' opportunity to seize, and I love him because the upside is there to be a top 12 guy this year. Next up, we're going in the direction of a player with a new team, and it comes in the form of a rookie in Jordan Addison. He was the wide receiver 37, or he is the wide receiver 37 at ADP, going in the middle of the 8th round. So we have a little blend here of a player that's obviously new to the team, but also rookies. Like, rookies can be a great way to get upside in fantasy football. If you just look at the last 3 seasons, there are plenty of them. The first round picks have returned significantly. Look at Garrett Wilson. You look at Drake London. You look at Chris Olave. These guys would have all crushed this ADP that Jordan Addison has. The year prior, Waddle, Chase, Smith would crush this ADP. And then as well in 2020 with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. So these guys are returning value in the immediate, in their first season. Like, there's no problem here with rookies. They consistently, whether it's the running back position or the wide receiver position, get involved. It's really just tight end when you have those concerns. And for Addison, he enters into a really, really good situation. You look at this offense, it's one of the highest volume passing offenses in the league. 64.4% pass rate was third. 39.6 pass attempts per game was also third. They were in that upper echelon, with the Chargers as that really high volume passing offense. And then you look at what this team did in the offseason, and to me it screams we're just going to double down on what we do in the passing game. And you could even see this increase. They let Dalvin Cook go, which is really interesting, and the depth behind Alexander Mattison stepping in as the RB1 is really poor. Like, there are not good options here. They've talked about it in camp. And Mattison has not been a fantastic rusher in his career. Last year, his EPA was just barely, it was like negative 0.4 is what I have, or negative 0.04 actually. So just barely below the league average. Nothing terrible there, but just, again, not a high-level back that I think they're going to here. And I think this is the type of volume, when you look at this offense, that is definitely capable of providing enough for 2 top 12 receivers, like a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, like a last year A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think it's possible. And I know we're going to have concerns of, hey, T.J. Hawkinson's here. He had a huge finish of the year, had a ton of targets. And you look at Hawkinson, he had, 8.6 targets per game. Jefferson at 11.3. But then you look at the offense. We lose Adam Thielen. He's 5.7 targets per game. You lose, or you also have KJ Osborne, who had 5.9 targets per game. And I do think Osborne grew into a bigger role because I think of Thielen's kind of declining play overall. I think it's a reason why the Vikings were willing to let him go and then bring in a first-round pick here with the wide receiver position in Addison. I think they can get better there. And I think Addison potentially could eat into a bit of Osborne's targets. So I think he'll easily take Thielen's at 5.7, get a little bit of Osborne's, maybe add another target there, at least, maybe a target and a half. And then as well, with Mattison coming in over Cook is a far superior pass catcher, so I could see them targeting the running back position a little bit less too. I think Addison can get to 7 targets per game. So I was doing the research here, looking at the last decade, I looked at the last 10 years of wide receivers in their rookie season, and more specifically, rookies that managed to play 10 plus games, so just stayed healthy, and average 7 plus targets a game, which I think Addison can do in this offense because, like I said, it's very high volume passing wise. Looked at those players. There are 18 instances in the last 10 years of players that were able to do that. This is realistic, I think, for Addison. Those receivers averaged 13.2 fantasy points per game, which would have been the wide receiver 15 last season. I know there's competition. I still think that competition isn't going to be enough from keeping Addison to return this value. And I think with his skill, he had a dominant season with a Pitt team just a couple of years ago. In the year before he arrived at USC, where it was a team that didn't traditionally like to throw the ball a whole hell of a lot, but they had to get this guy the ball because he's super, super talented. Obviously, when you look at that first round pick, we know he is talented. So I like what Addison can do, returning this value and really exploding this year if things go right. And that's what we're looking at in upside. Like, when I talk about upside, I'm looking at, here's the rosiest picture for this guy, and is it realistic? I think it's realistic because this is a high volume passing offense. And if Addison is as good as I think he is, he could be the wide receiver or the number 2 pass catcher in this offense, potentially ahead of TJ Hawkinson. Maybe Hawkinson isn't getting 8.6 targets per game. Maybe that's Addison instead, and we see Hawkinson more in that 7 area. So love Addison. Plenty of upside here, plenty to be excited about, and we have that unknown as a rookie in a new offense that some people might be scared of. Finally, we have a wide receiver going outside the top 50 at the position. It is the wide receiver 50 going as the 1104 in fantasy football drafts right now. It is Jamison Williams of the Detroit Lions. Now, hold on with me. I know there's concern here, right? Jamison Williams is going to miss the first 6 games of the season. Hey, maybe you don't draft him, but while you're watching this video, I want you to know that this is a player that needs to be on your radar in the early weeks of the season, because if you don't draft him, you could potentially trade for him. I'll probably talk about him during the year because the opportunity is really good for this guy, and the talent I know is really good. So here's the deal. We have an offense that was a top 5 scoring offense last season, 26.6 points per game. They were great. They were one of the best offenses in the league. You can't look past that. And they have good passing volume. When you look at last season, I think it's capable of an offense that's capable of supporting 2 wide receivers. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be the volume guy. He's going to dominate, post 150. I think he's going to get 150 plus targets this season. I think he's going to have a huge year. But you look at the offense, 34.6 pass attempts per game. That was 12th in the NFL, so well above the league average at a good rate. And then you look at the talent at all their receiver spots other than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And there's so many targets last year that just went to underwhelming talents. Khalif Raymond, 62 targets. DJ Chark, 51 targets. Josh Reynolds, 56 targets. TJ Hawkinson had 43 targets in 7 games. That's 212 targets that went to guys. I think Hawkinson's a tell, but Hawkinson is gone. That's 212 targets to those 4 guys. That's a lot of volume, right? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will take a little bit of those, but there are 94 targets here between Chark and Hawkinson that are straight up out the window. Ones that I think Jamison Williams can step into once he's back. Can Jamison Williams, missing 6 games, be a, on the season top 24 guy? Maybe not, but in a points per game wise, I definitely think he can, and just cut this ADP he has in half as the wide receiver 50. That's why I think this opportunity becomes really interesting, and even more interesting when you think about the fact he's an extra year removed from that ACL surgery. Because again, we've seen it with the wide receiver or the running back position, returning from an ACL surgery in that first year can be really tough for guys. And that's what the Lions did last season. They took it easy with Williams. They didn't give him a massive role because of the risk that comes with returning from that injury. And he suffered that injury late in his final season at Alabama. But let's not forget the talent this guy is. He was the 12th overall pick. This is a top 12 pick in 2022 with blazing, unbelievable speed. Ran a 4.39 40. And as well was unguardable. If you go back and watch the tape, for all you college football fans out there, Jamison Williams was unguardable in college football in his final season at Alabama. If he did not get hurt in the the national championship game. I'm mixing this up. Regardless, when he got hurt in the college football playoff, it honestly changed their entire trajectory in that game. He posted over almost 1,600 yards in 15 games and 15 touchdowns. And if you look at his size, this isn't a prototypical guy to score a ton of touchdowns. He's 6'1", he got a little bit of size, not too much, but man, he is so fast, he's so dynamic, he's such an unbelievably good big play threat that once he gets on the field for an offense that can score points and has a terrific play caller in Ben Johnson, I think the sky's the limit for this guy. That you could take the flyer out, you could draft him as wide receiver 50, take him as that sleeper, sit on him for 6 weeks, or we can talk about him, 5 weeks into the season. But Jamison Williams is a player with some really high upside when you look into this thing deeper. All right, those are my 3 highest upside wide receivers heading into the 2023 fantasy season. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to drop a like. Would really, really appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, we're posting tons of fantasy content for you. Would love if you hit that subscribe button. And as well, comment down below with some players you think have some high upside here. What do you think of these guys? Would love to hear from you down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.